Welcome back to the Good, the Bad, and the Fucking Ugly podcast. I'm your host, Pretty Girl Tip. Sometimes the hardest addiction isn't a substance, it's a person. All right, I'm gonna hold you guys' hand while we do this podcast because it's titled Why We Keep Going Back to People Who Hurt Us. Okay, let's dive in. You blocked them, you cried, you swore you were done, and then they text you, and somehow you were right back where you started. This episode is about the cycle of returning to people who have repeatedly hurt us, disappointed us, and confused us. We are unpacking why letting go isn't always as simple as walking away, and why healing often means breaking emotional habits by just not ending relationships. You may ask yourself why it feels good to go back. Let's be honest. Going back almost never seems to start with logic. It starts with a feeling. Because despite everything they did, despite the tears, the sleepless nights, the disappointment, being with them feels familiar and it also feels safe. We are creatures of habit. We return to what we know because uncertainty is uncomfortable. Even when a relationship hurts us, our minds can still see it as home simply because we spent so much time there. This person knows your favorite restaurant, they know your coffee order, they know your fears, your dreams, and also your insecurities. They know what makes you laugh and what makes you cry, and there's comfort in that. Starting over means becoming vulnerable all over again. It means introducing yourself to someone new, telling them your story again, learning another person's habits, and risking disappointment from a different person. Sometimes going back isn't because they were good for you, sometimes it's because they're familiar to you. And then there are the memories. You don't replay the nights you cried yourself to sleep. You replay the road trips, the inside jokes, the random phone calls, the forehead kisses, the way they looked at you when everything seemed perfect. You remember the version of them that made you feel loved. And you remember the moments that convinced you that this was your person. Because memories are selective. They don't always show us the whole relationship, they often show us highlights. And then comes the most dangerous thought of all. Maybe this time it will be different. Maybe they've changed and maybe they've grown. Maybe losing you made them realize your worth. Maybe the apology is genuine. Maybe this is finally your happy ending. Hope can be beautiful, but hope can also keep you stuck because sometimes we're not returning to who someone actually is. We are returning to who we believe they have the potential to be. And potential can keep people in unhealthy situations for years because every single act of kindness feels like proof. Every text message feels like progress. Every apology feels like a change. And before you know it, you convince yourself that this version of them, the version you imagine, is real. Now, we're going to have a short mirror moment. I just want everyone listening to sit with this question. Am I missing this person or am I missing who I hope they would become? Because these are two totally, completely different things. Are you grieving them or are you grieving the future you picture with them? The marriage, the family, the trips, the life you had planned in your head. Sometimes the hardest thing to do isn't to let go of the person, it's the possibility. And possibilities can be incredibly addictive because as long as there is possibility, there's hope. And as long as there's hope, we can keep opening doors that shouldn't have remained open. Just because someone feels familiar doesn't mean they're safe. And just because you miss someone doesn't mean you're meant to return to them. Okay, that's the good. You know how this goes. We go to the bad. The cycle of temporary change. And this is when things start to get messy. Because after the breakup, after the crime, after the unfollowing and the blocking, they come back. And somehow they always know exactly when to show up. When you finally start smiling again, when you finally start to heal, when you finally accepting that it's over, that's when your phone lights up. I've been thinking about you. I miss you. Can we talk? And suddenly everything you worked so hard to rebuild starts shaking from the foundation. Then comes the apology. I'm sorry. I know I messed up. I've changed. I'll do better. And then maybe they even cry a little bit. Maybe they sound sincere. Maybe this is the most accountability you've ever heard from them. Then comes the promises. They promise to communicate. They promise effort. They promise honesty. They promise they'll never hurt you again. And for a little while, they actually do a little better. They text first, they're attentive, they're affectionate, they're consistent. They give you exactly what you've been asking for, and you think, damn, this is it. They are finally become the person I needed them to be. So you let your guard down. You trust again, you hope again, you invest again, and then the calls become less frequent, the effort starts fading, the communication changes, the old behavior returns, and suddenly you're back in the exact same fucking spot you were before, confused, disappointed, heartbroken again. Because here's the painful truth: some people don't change, some people simply change long enough to get access to you again. Temporary effort is not transformation. Anybody can behave differently for a week. Anybody can say the right things for a month. Real change is often over time, because change isn't what someone does when they're trying to get you back. Change is what continues doing after they've gotten comfortable again. That is the difference. And this cycle becomes addictive because every small improvement feels like proof that your patience has finally paid off. You tell yourself, maybe they just needed more time. Maybe healing isn't linear. Maybe relationships are just hard. And while some of those things are true, sometimes we're using those statements to excuse patterns that have already been shown to us in this person. Because people usually don't reveal themselves once, they reveal themselves repeatedly. The problem is we often keep waiting for a different answer. Mirror moment in this section, just think about these questions. How many times has someone apologized for the same behavior? How many times have you accepted promises that never became permanent? How many times have you confused effort with change? Because effort can be temporary, but character is consistent. The quote of the week is: consistency is what creates trust. Temporary effort creates confusion. If someone only changes when they're afraid of losing you, this isn't growth. This is panic. And relationships cannot survive on temporary panic. They survive on sustained change. Don't fall in love with who someone becomes when they're trying to get you back. Pay attention to who they become once they have you again. Okay, now we get to the fucking ugly part of all of this. You're addicted to the possibility. Now, this is the part that no one wants to talk about, because sometimes you're not in love. And I know that's hard to hear. But hear me out while I hold your hand. Sometimes you're attached to who they could be, attached to the memories, attached to the chemistry, attached to finally being chosen. Because if you were being honest, and we are always honest, sometimes relationships survive on almost. Almost together, almost committed, almost healed, almost right. And almost can keep you emotionally hostage for years. Because every once in a while, they give you something: a good conversation, a passionate night, a vulnerable moment, a random text message saying they missed you, just enough to make you believe that they were there all along. And this is where you get stuck. Not what the relationship actually is, but what it could be. You're addicted to possibility. You're addicted to the idea that one day they'll wake up and realize that you were everything that they needed. One day they'll love you correctly. One day they'll choose you without hesitation. One day they'll become the person you've been waiting on. But here's the problem: you built a relationship with the potential while ignoring the reality. Reality says they're consistent. Reality says they keep disappointing you. Reality says they've shown you the same pattern over and over and over again. But potential whispers, maybe next time, and maybe next time, and maybe next time. And before you know it, years have passed, and you're still waiting for someone to become a person they've never consistently shown themselves to be. Then there's the chemistry. Whew, this is not for the faint of heart. Chemistry will have you making terrible decisions, because chemistry feels like love. Chemistry feels intense. Chemistry feels electric. Chemistry feels like faith. But chemistry and compatibility are not the same thing. You can have incredible chemistry with someone who continually breaks your heart. You can have unbelievable passion with someone who can never decide and give you the relationship that you deserve. And because the connection feels so powerful, you convince yourself it must mean something. Maybe it does. But just because something is powerful doesn't mean it's healthy. These are where the memories kick in. You remember your first kiss, those late night conversations, the laughter, the vacations, the moments that made you feel special. You remember pieces of them. And sometimes you're going to try to get that version of the relationship that no longer exists, or maybe it never existed at all. Because sometimes we don't miss the person, we miss how we felt when we believed in them. And then there's the deepest one of all, the desire to be chosen. Sometimes it's not even about love anymore. It's about winning. It's about proving that you were enough, that you were always worth staying for, worth committing to, worth changing, worth choosing. Because rejections bruise something inside of you. And as part of you believe if you're finally picked, it'll heal everything. But someone choosing you doesn't determine your value. And chasing validation from a person who hurt you is like asking the person who cut you to become your bandage. The same hands that wounded you cannot always heal you. And here's one of the hard truths. Some people keep returning because they want a different ending to the same story. I'm going to read that again and hold your hand. Some people keep returning because they want a different ending to the same story. You keep reopening the book because you hate how the last chapter ended. You keep going back trying to rewrite the ending, but sometimes the lesson isn't to keep reading. Sometimes the lesson is to close the book. Because closure isn't always getting the ending you wanted. Sometimes closure is accepting that the story was never meant to become what you imagined. You weren't addicted to them. You were addicted to who you believed they could become and the hope that one day they'll choose you the way you've always chosen them. Now, our last segment, the mirror moment, which is where we just reflect and we just have a hard look at what this looks like. You may ask yourself, why does this feel so hard? And this is the part of the episode where we stop talking about them. And again, we start talking about us. Because healing doesn't happen by only analyzing the person who hurt you. Healing happens when you're willing to look in the mirror. And I know this is uncomfortable because it's easier to ask, why would they do this to me? Why didn't they choose me? Why couldn't they love me right? But today, I want to ask different questions. Like, why do I keep accepting less? Why do I need closure from someone who keeps hurting me? Why am I trying to prove by staying? Sit with those questions because your answers may change your life. Why do you keep accepting less? Is it because you're afraid of being alone? Because you think this is what's the best you'll ever get? Because you've become so used to surviving disappointment that you've mistaken inconsistency for love? Sometimes we tolerate things not because they're acceptable, but because they're familiar. Then ask yourself, why do I need closure from someone who keeps hurting me? Because sometimes what we really are seeking isn't closure, we're seeking validation. We want them to finally say, you mattered. I was wrong. I should have treated you better. You deserve more. We were waiting for the person who hurt you to somehow become the person who heals us. And that doesn't always happen. Sometimes closure isn't another conversation. Sometimes closure is accepting that they may never become who we needed them to be. And there lies the hardest question of all. What am I trying to prove by staying? Am I trying to prove that I'm lovable, that I'm patient, that I'm worth fighting for? That if I love hard enough, sacrifice hard enough, and wait long enough, someone will finally choose me? Because sometimes you're not fighting for love, you're fighting to feel worthy. And that's why it hurts so much. Because every rejection feels personal. Every broken promise feels like evidence that somehow you weren't enough. But hear me clearly and hear me when I say this. Their inability to love you correctly is not proof that you were difficult to love. Their inconsistency is not a measurement of your value. Their confusion is not your identity. You were worthy before they came into your life, and you'll still be worthy long after they're fucking gone. Sometimes we return to people as part of us believes that we finally can make this work. It'll heal itself deeper inside of us. The abandonment, the rejection, the insecurity, the fear of not being enough. But no relationship can fix what you don't believe in yourself. Because if you don't believe you're worthy, you keep accepting relationships that force you to earn what you should be given freely: love, consistency, respect, and peace. Now, I would like everyone to answer this honestly. Pass it on to a friend, tell a friend to tell a friend. Am I staying because this relationship is healthy, or am I leaving because this will force me to face something inside of myself? Because sometimes walking away means facing loneliness, facing grief, facing disappointment, facing the fact that the future you imagine may never happen, and that is painful. But avoiding pain isn't healing. Healing is feeling it, learning from it, and refusing to abandon yourself to keep someone else. The goal isn't to become someone who never got hurt. The goal is to become someone who no longer needs another person's love to prove their worth. Now, the comeback. We are breaking the cycle. So, what now, you may ask? How do you stop going back? How do you break the cycle that has become so familiar? It's simple. You heal. Not by pretending you don't miss them, not by acting like it never mattered, not by becoming bitter. You heal by becoming honest. Because healing isn't forgetting, healing is remembering everything and still choosing yourself. Healing looks like choosing peace over chemistry. I know chemistry is insane. The conversation flowed, the attraction was magnetic, the connection was undeniable. But peace lets you sleep at night. Peace doesn't have you question where you stand. Peace doesn't disappear and reappear whenever it's convenient. Peace doesn't make you earn consistency. And sometimes the love of your life won't feel like fireworks. Sometimes it'll feel like safety. Healing also looks like accepting the truth instead of potential. And this is a hard one because potential is seductive. Potential always says, maybe one day, maybe if I wait, maybe if I love harder. But healing says, I have to accept who they are right now. Not who they will become, not who they are on their best days, not who they promise to be, who they are consistently. Because who they are actually are in the relationship with, and that is the biggest part. And I need everyone listening to me. Just hear me out. Healing is missing them without going back. You're allowed to miss them. You're allowed to miss their laughter, the conversations, the memories, the routines, and the good parts. Missing someone is completely human, but missing someone doesn't mean you need to reopen that wound. You can love someone and still understand that they're not healthy for you. You can miss someone and still choose distance. You can grieve someone and still keep moving forward. Because healing isn't about the absence of feelings. Healing is no longer allowing your feelings to control your decisions. And then we get to the deepest part of healing, loving yourself enough to disappoint the version of you that still wants them. Because there is still a version of you that still hopes they'll call, still hopes they'll change, still hopes you'll get the ending you imagine. And letting go of that version of yourself can feel like another heartbreak because you're not only grieving the person, you're grieving the dream, the future, the possibility, the fantasy, and that's okay because every version of you doesn't get to come with you. Some versions of you were created in survival mode. Some versions of you accepted crumbs because they were only starving for love. Some versions of you confused attention for affection. Some versions of you kept returning because they didn't know they deserved more. But you're becoming someone different now. Someone who chooses themselves. Someone who values peace. Someone who understands that love should not require consistent recovery. Someone who finally knows their worth. The person you're becoming may require letting go of the person you've been chasing. Stop returning to the fire that keeps burning you. You deserve a love that doesn't require recovery. And maybe that's the real lesson. Maybe that's why things haven't been changing. Maybe this is why you are about to change. Maybe this is about learning that love isn't proven by how much pain you can endure, but love is proven by how safe, respected, and valued you feel. And if someone keeps teaching you the same painful lesson, maybe it's because the lesson isn't for you to keep trying. Maybe the lesson is to finally let go because your future deserves a version of you that has stopped begging for what should have been given freely. And that version of you is waiting on the other side of this goodbye. This has been the good, the bad, and the fucking ugly podcast. I am going to emotionally and physically unhold your hand. But remember this, sometimes closure isn't another conversation. Sometimes closure is finally choosing yourself. Okay, it's our favorite time of the week. Red flag of the week. Okay, you guys ready? Okay. If someone only values you when you're leaving, they're not afraid of losing you. They're afraid of losing access to you. Okay. All right. This has been the good, the bad, and the fucking ugly podcast. Remember this. Sometimes closure isn't another conversation. Sometimes closure is finally choosing yourself. Until next time, protect your peace, know your worth, and stop setting yourself on fire just to keep someone else warm. Okay? I see you guys next week. Love you. Bye.